Good morning, folks. Welcome to another of our daily devotionals. We're going to continue on today in Psalm 25. And the verse we're going to focus on is verse 16. It makes mention of a condition, a felt experience with which many a Christian can identify. It speaks about loneliness. I am lonely and afflicted. Now, some people, on account of their character and on account of their psychological makeup, prefer to be on their own rather than have lots of people around them. They don't like the company of others. They want to be on their own. However, that is not only unusual, it is also actually unhealthy. Because the Bible tells us in Genesis 2 that being isolated, being on our own, is not a good thing. This is the one thing about creation that God said was not good, Adam being on his own. It is not good for the man to be alone. And so God makes a companion for Adam, Eve. Without Eve, Adam is incomplete. And some wag then jokingly went on to say that whenever God brought Eve to Adam, that was Adam finished. Well, we may joke about it, but the fact remains God does not intend us to be alone. In verse 16 of this 25th Psalm, the psalmist feels alone, and he goes on to say that this experience of aloneness, this feeling of isolation, is an affliction to him. An affliction is a cause or a source of pain or distress or suffering. Now, we all know that there were various other reasons why the psalmist was experiencing pain and suffering. He goes on to speak about his enemies and his foes. He speaks about the violence and hatred that is being directed against him. His own sins have caused him to experience pain and suffering. But the fact that he mentions feeling loneliness, this was a big problem for the psalmist. It was something he felt keenly. Think about it. He'd been surrounded by thousands of people when he was in Jerusalem and in the palace. And now, as one who's on the run, he's hiding out with a handful of supporters, and he feels so very, very alone. Maybe he even feels as though God has abandoned him. Feelings of loneliness can at times be overwhelming. And many of God's people suffer feelings of loneliness, often due to changes that come about in life's circumstances. So here you have a wife or a husband who loses their spouse through death. Maybe they've had no children, or maybe they have had children, but the children are living some distance away. And whenever life returns to the new normal after the funeral and burial service and so on, it all is so terribly lonely. And as time passes, we all know that fewer and fewer people call until a visit from someone becomes the exception rather than the norm. Or here's a single fella or a single girl living with their parents. Their parents get old. They take on the responsibility of caring for their parents, and they give all their time to that. And then in time their parents die. And that fella, that girl, feels very lonely. Or the person who moves to a new town or a new city, maybe to study at university, maybe to take on a new job, and they just can't seem to fit in and make good friends, and it's all so very lonely when they go back to their home at night. Or maybe a person who moves to a new church and no one really bothers much with them, maybe even while they're at church, but certainly not outside of church meetings. They're never invited round for a cup of tea or for supper or for an evening meal. Nobody ever calls and visits them, and they feel lonely. Now, there are, of course, things that those who are lonely can do and should do to address the loneliness problem in their life. That individual needs to be proactive. But there are also things that other Christians can do to alleviate this loneliness that is experienced by those whom we know. Calling around, having them over, arranging to go out for a walk or for coffee or whatever. But of course, the person who, like David, is feeling lonely must also remember that he or she always has the Lord as his or her companion. The Lord has said, "Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you." In Psalm 27, the psalmist says, "Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will take me up." Turn to me and be gracious to me, says the psalmist, for I am lonely and afflicted. If you're feeling lonely today, do something about it. Get involved in things. Make changes to your life. But always remember, you're not really alone. If you're a child of God, God is with you. He will never leave you, never forsake you. Nurture and develop that very real personal companionship with him. And for those of us who can help the lonely, let us think about doing that and bringing companionship into the lives of those around us. Have a good day. Every blessing.